Okay, so in this part of the arrow building series, I'm going to tell you how and where to cut your arrows. So the most complicated part is where to cut your arrows. I'll start off with that. So basically, when most carbon arrows are made, the process that is the most common process that is used involves a mandrel. And the mandrel is just a solid rod of some kind of metal, and the carbon is wrapped around it. And then the carbon and the mandrel is heated up, cooled down at different rates. And that can cause little bits of warp in the mandrel at about the last 3/4 of an inch of the mandrel. So that equates to 3/4 of an inch of your carbon shaft being slightly warped more than like the middle of your carbon shaft. So I always like to cut off at least 3/4 of an inch off of both ends. And from there, then I'll get a arrow spinner out and spin the arrow, looking for which end is the most wobbly, which end is the least wobbly, and kind of going from there. But that's kind of how you know where to cut your arrows. And then I'll kind of show you how to cut your arrows next. Okay, so this is the saw that I have. It's Cabela's brand, but I know that lots of other brands carry this exact same saw. It has worked for me. I know it's not quite the best out there, but really all that matters in my mind is the RPM. So you're looking for a high power one because a lot of these saws normally get bogged down really easily and that type of thing. But all I did to modify it was stick some electrical tape in these pockets here just so the arrow would spin a little bit easier on that slicker surface. I've done the same thing down here. It'll spin a little bit easier on that thicker slicker surface there. And now I'll go ahead and show you exactly how I use it. Okay, so I went ahead and set my saw, moved this piece down here, made it so that I'm only cutting off about 3/4 of an inch down here, 3/4 of an inch to an inch, whatever you feel comfortable with and whatever you can stand. So now I'm going to show you what I do when the saw is turned on. So typically I'm going to put my hand really close to this end, and I'm going to have a force pushing that way. So jamming this arrow into that pocket, into that same place every time. So that's what I'm doing with this hand. I'm just kind of pushing that way, making sure it stays in that pocket. As well as with both hands, and actually just this hand, is I'm rotating it this way. So on this particular saw, the blade spins this way. So the front edge of it that I'll be cutting with is going down. So I'm going to want the arrow to come up. And I actually rotate the shaft while I'm cutting just to get a more even cut instead of just plunging it right in there. Typically that leaves with an uneven cut. So again, pushing back in here and pushing down into that pocket. And then as I go in, I'll just kind of scratch a line all the way around. And then I'll just keep scratching around and around and around. And normally I rotate it 3 or 4 times before it finally cuts all the way through. And that's how you cut an arrow. Now I'll kind of show you how I do it with the saw on. Okay, so I've gone ahead and cut all the arrows on one end. Now I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to have to adjust my saw to cut 3/4 of an inch off of the other end. And just one thing to watch out for, again, is don't let your saw get bogged down. So you don't want to be mashing that arrow right into that because your saw will slow down. And when it slows down, the carbon will get frayed a little bit. So you want to have a nice clean cut. And to get that clean cut, you gotta have your saw spinning fast. And to get your saw spinning fast, you gotta be spinning your arrow slow and putting your arrow slow into the saw. So now I will cut the other end. Okay, so now that we've cut 3/4 of an inch off of both ends of the shaft, here's what I'm gonna do next. So go ahead and grab yourself a spinner, And then what you're gonna wanna know next is how much more you're gonna need to cut off of that shaft. For me, it's gonna be about 2 inches. So I'm going to spin it, and as I'm spinning it, I'm looking 2 inches in from the end of that shaft. So 2 inches in from the end, 2 inches in from the end on both ends. And then I'm going to see which end wobbles the least 2 inches from the end. So I'm looking right here, and I'm looking to see, and that's got kind of a medium amount of wobble. And then looking at the same place over here, and there's almost no wobble 2 inches from the end over here. So I'm gonna end up cutting this end and making that the end that my knock is gonna go in, because having a straight knock is the most important thing of the shaft. If the point is crooked, that's not near as big of a deal as the knock. So actually, if you look at this, so the very end of the shaft is more wobbly on this end than it is over here. So it's kind of a medium amount throughout the whole length of this end over here. But then down here, it's really wobbly right on that last inch. But then as you go in another inch, it gets almost perfectly straight. So I'm gonna cut off that end, and then I'll get down to that perfectly straight section and use that as my knock. So now I'm gonna go through the rest of my arrows and do the exact same thing, and just try to make one end perfectly straight and not necessarily worry about the other end. Okay, so in this case, the arrow is very, very straight. So I'm just barely getting any wobble down here and just a tiny little bit down here. So what do you do in this situation? Well, I would, because both ends are so straight, I would just cut off the most wobbly end, because that makes it even a little bit more straighter. I'm okay with the knock end being used on the slightly wobblier end, because it'll end up being really straight compared to all the other arrows anyway. So that's kind of what I would do in this situation. Okay, so now I've got my arrows cut down to my final length. Hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit more complicated than what most people think. But if you have any questions, drop them down in the comment section, and we'll go from there. But thanks for watching.